Barkadawar Haka and welcome. I'm Samson Omale in Jos, Nigeria, and this is Africa Matters. This week, we look at the impact of sanctions on Niger 10 months after the military ousted the democratically elected president. The coup has impacted every sector of the country, reversing hard-earned gains. Globally, there have been more than 200 successful military coups since 1950. 106 of them were in Africa. One of the most recently affected countries is Niger. Let's take a closer look. On July 26, 2023, President Bazoum was detained by his presidential guards at his official residence in the capital, Niamey. On the 29th, former colonial ruler France and the European Union suspended aid to the country, while the African Union urged coup leaders to return to the barracks. A day later, ECOWAS imposed economic sanctions, freezing all commercial and financial transactions between member states and Niger, one of the continent's poorest nations. On August 1st, Niger reopened land and air borders with Algeria, Burkina Faso, Mali, Libya, and Chad. The country's key entryways for commerce and trade remained closed due to ECOWAS restrictions. The following day, Nigeria cut power to Niger, accounting for 70% of its power. On August 3rd, Niger coup leaders revoked 5 military cooperation agreements with France. They also suspended broadcast of French state-funded international news outlets, France 24 and RFI. Fast forward the timeline to 2024, ECOWAS in February lifted travel, commercial and economic sanctions on Niger to ease the suffering on the people. The following month, Niger suspended a military agreement with the United States and ordered American armed forces personnel to leave. Niger is the largest recipient of U.S. military assistance in the West African region, having received an estimated $500 million since 2012. This month, Russian troops were deployed to the Nigerian air base where American soldiers are located. ECOWAS' move to ease economic sanctions on Niger earlier this year was seen as an attempt to engage in dialogue with the junta that had recently come into power. But so far, the strategy has had little impact. As Rahul Radhakrishnan reports from Niamey, Niger is ready to form new alliances.
No one misses the news broadcasts in Niamey these days, especially since news broke last year of sanctions imposed on Niger by ECOWAS, an influential West African economic and political bloc. Ferreira Hassan felt betrayed. The mother of 5 believes African states should treat each other like family.
This is not what a family would do. If this was a family, what they did was horrible. The ECOWAS states didn't act like family at all. See, even our neighbors are suffering from it. There is no country in West Africa that is not feeling the impact of these sanctions. The economic crisis impacted all of the Western African countries, and even more so, Niger.
The sanctions came as a punitive measure after a military coup in Niger last July, in which the country's democratically elected leader was deposed. But ordinary Nigerians were left feeling the impact. The cost of a bag of rice went up by nearly 45%. In a country that is long ranked among the world's poorest.
I don't understand the ECOWAS sanctions, to be honest, but I know what they did was bad for us. We are indeed hurt by it, but we are still in our business. We don't care about ECOWAS anymore. They are the ones who will regret their actions.
Critics say that perhaps ECOWAS acted too quickly with their trade and border blockades and threats of a military intervention. In February, it softened its stance and eased those sanctions, a move seen as both an act of appeasement and an attempt to engage in a dialogue with the junta.
But an unexpected effect of these sanctions has been a greater sense of cooperation, as well as the formation of an alliance between the military leaders in Bamako, Niamey, and Ouagadougou. And they say that this unprecedented alliance is paving their path to sovereignty.
Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger have left the bloc and plan to form a tri-state confederation. And while shedding former allies, they're building new bonds. At Niamey's Grand Marché, Ibrahim Hassan's mates call him Putin for his unrelenting support for the Russian president. His opinions, though, aren't factually accurate or even popular.
For us, Russia is a foundation. They helped us kick out France. We received support from Russia. They are like elder brothers for us. All African countries want to work with Russia.
But Russia's growing presence in the region has many worried in the West, particularly France, who were forced to withdraw troops late last year. While new political beginnings are being built in West Africa, now in post-coup Niger, for many, it's the family they choose that counts. Rahul Radhakrishnan, Africa Matters, Niamey, Niger.
As a result, families have been affected the most. Let's hear more now from Harun Aldo. He's a legal practitioner. He joins me here in Jos. Mr. Harun, grain access prices have been increased by more than 12%. And as we look at rice, they've also had the highest inflation of about 35%. What will this have? What impact will this have on families in Niger?
Well, those increases you mentioned, 12% and 35%, when you put that together and juxtapose it with the reality of Nigerians, a largely agrarian economy in a desert enclosed region, coupled with high levels of poverty, sometimes described probably in the 60-70% levels, then you do know that the impact has been enormous indeed, in very negative terms, as far as people of Niger are concerned. So there is no two ways about it. Nigerians have, for several years, taken the brunt of political mismanagement and how this has affected them in terms of the financial and economic well-being, and the crisis engendered by the current situation in Niger, the political fallout and the coup that took place is taking its toll on the people. So the people of Niger are actually in a very bad space as we speak. People might talk about a tunnel and the light at the end of the tunnel. I am not sure if that is where the Nigerians are headed, but it's a very dire situation. And I think that Nigerians are in great need of help.
Okay, how about the economic impact in general, seeing that the EU and other international partners have suspended funding?
Well, I thought that was it was a premeditated step. Yes, it is true that the situation in Niger, as in many Francophone speaking countries in Africa, has been a very terrible one. The legacy of French colonial rule left a very terrible, indelible mark in terms of the relationship between the former colonial master and now so-called independent states in Francophone Africa. Like many countries in Francophone Africa, Niger has had its fair share of bad leadership. So again, we must not absorb the local political equation in terms of the capacity of the local politicians to deliver good governance. That has been questionable for several years. And in the aftermath of the coup, the military intervention, we saw this hasty, what I describe as a hasty decision by a lot of people, both within the economic community of West African states and even the international community, in terms of how they took steps to withdraw support, impose sanctions. The European Union, in their own wisdom, thought this was the best way to go, targeting the military regime. But they forget, the interventions by these multilateral agencies are intended for the people. It's not for leaders. Yes, leaders have always appropriated it and mismanaged them, but I thought that the approach by the European Union and other partners would have been to do targeted sanctions against individuals who, in their estimation, would have truncated democracy. So these impositions were a bit thoughtless and knee-jerk, and I'm not sure that these are given the results that are desired, because at the end of the day, the people at the receiving end are the majority of the ordinary people of Niger.
We have more stories coming up for you here on Africa Matters, including
I am Moses Habyarimana in Gatumba in Burundi, and I will be reporting on how floods has impacted the people living here.
We continue with our Inside Niger coverage. The junta-led West African states of Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger are planning to establish a confederation. This means greater military, economic and political cooperation. But Daesh and Al-Qaeda-linked groups continue to pose a threat to the stability of the region. Rahul Rajesh Krishnan has more from Niamey.
It's a persisting battle that's killed thousands and displaced over 2 million people in the West African Sahel region. Nigerian forces have been battling Daesh and Al-Qaeda-linked groups for years. The terror groups are threatening villages outside the capital, Niamey, and village chiefs are living in exile. They're known here as kings. And as the terror groups battle to gain influence, it's the kings they kill first, he says. They come to our villages, rob homes, steal livestock, and often kill people. Until earlier this year, France had a strong military presence across the Sahel. The US operates a drone base in Niger to monitor and target terrorist groups. But Niger was the latest to sever ties with the West after a coup last July. And while the threat still exists, many believe it's decreasing under the current authorities.
It's true that the Americans and the French have been there for some time now. But we as civilians don't know what they were doing. But what is sure is that we have noticed that there's still always attacks, despite their presence. Despite all their surveillance and military abilities, there were still attacks.
This year, the junta-led authorities of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger announced the formation of a joint force to fight terrorism in the region.
But along with demands and desires for change in West Africa, there's also a larger geopolitical shift taking place. Russia's footprint in the region is growing.
The three countries have recently strengthened ties with Russia. Officials say they're here to develop a military cooperation.
For us, Russia is a hopeful path to a real fight against terrorism. Russia, along with any other countries willing to provide us with real support, will help us emerge from insecurity and underdevelopment and poverty. That's what we've been waiting for.
Yet, threats facing the Sahel may linger even with new military alliances. Insecurity here is tireless and difficult to measure. Rahul Radhakrishnan, Africa Matters, Niamey, Niger.
To neighboring Benin, the cost of basic commodities has doubled in recent months, mainly because of last year's border closure with neighboring Niger. Thousands of people have since taken to the streets of the capital, Cotonou, to protest the high cost of living. Grace Kuria Kanja with the details.
They are drumming up attention because they can't afford their basic needs. Border closure with the country's main trading partner Niger, the end of fuel subsidies in Nigeria, and the Ukraine war's impact on grain imports are the main reasons behind the inflation.
A hungry stomach has no ears. We've suffered so much from hunger in this country that we've ended up being exasperated. So at some point, we had to raise our voices to let the current leaders know about our misery and our difficulties.
Beninese unions have called for a series of protests, and many have been arrested. The ever-busy market Dantokpa in Cotonou now has little to no activity.
We will end up dying because of all this. What are we going to do with this price increase? It wasn't like this before. We have other bills to pay, including our rents and taxes. The government must think of us because we voted for them.
As they hope this becomes food for thought for their leaders, the surge in prices continues to be unbearable.
Before, with $82, you could make a sauce, but today you need 10 times that. You have 5 tomatoes for $82, the pile of pepper has increased by 4 times. So everything has become expensive.
According to the World Bank, the Beninese economy in 2023 proved resilient despite the external economic shocks the West African country experienced. But now people are looking forward to the day they can easily afford a meal to put on their table. Grace Kuriakanja, Africa Matters.
Still in West Africa, treasures looted more than 150 years ago by the British Empire have been put on display by Ghana's Ashanti king. The 32 silver and gold artifacts, including a gold peace pipe, are on loan from the Victoria and Albert Museum and the British Museum in London, and Ghanaians are demanding they be handed back permanently. But a researcher and historian at the Office of the Kingdom says it is impossible to hold onto the artifacts for good. Rory Sinkamam reports.
A great kingdom with its history tainted by the scars of imperial conflicts and colonialism. Treasures of supremacy and power which embody the soul, spirit and history of the kingdom were looted during clashes between the British and the Ashanti people in the 19th century. After 150 years, some of the treasures are back in their homeland, the Ashanti Kingdom, marking a significant moment.
We are displaying this for you to see that the items that were stolen, looted in 1874, not all of them has returned, but what we have here still embodies the soul of Ashanti.
The former colonizers admit that the history surrounding their acquisition is a painful one.
These treasures have borne witness to the triumphs and trials of a great kingdom, and their return to Kumasi is a testament to the power of cultural exchange and reconciliation.
The returned artifacts have since been on public display at the Manchia Palace Museum as part of celebrations marking the Asante King Utumfo Osei Tutu II's Silver Jubilee.
It's a collection of historic and emotional moments. For the first time in 150 years, elements that embody the soul and spirit of Ghana's Ashanti Kingdom are on display. They have returned to their homeland, but the people will only get to keep them for a limited period of time. Why? They are on loan.
Many Ghanaians are struggling to understand that the items are on loan and will go back to London. Legal instruments prevent Britain from permanently handing the looted artifacts over to their original owners. Ni Kwate, a Ghanaian filmmaker who first exposed the looted artifacts stacked in UK museums over 50 years ago, is working with African lawmakers to fight that law.
An armed robber comes to your house, kills your children, loses your property, and then he brings it back as a loan, and it's supposed to be a law against returning fully. So we want to launch a campaign in England to campaign for the repeal of that law.
But a researcher and historian, Osebunsu Safo Kantanka, says they are fighting a lost battle.
Whichever items taken during war is termed war booty. Now, war booties are no more belonging to the owners, the original owners. Those who have seized these items are now the owners. So if they are the owners, it is up to them to decide whether to give it to you for good or on loan, or even to refuse to give it to you at all.
With growing momentum in campaigning for reparations and the permanent return of the items by colonial powers, only time will tell how long museums and institutions will be able to keep these stolen artifacts in the name of legal provisions. Until then, African treasures will remain in foreign lands. Rolin Sikamam, Africa Matters, Ghana.
To South Africa now. The coastal city of Durban is grappling with a water crisis ahead of the general elections. The dry taps and poor service delivery have been blamed on the ruling ANC party and could potentially swing the outcome of the upcoming polls. Yaren Dinch reports.
Hidden behind its tropical climate and popular beaches, Durban is in crisis. The city is suffering from poor sanitation services and a severe water shortage. Many residents rely on water tankers and have to carry water from the distribution points.
We can't even use the shower. We have to put it in a bucket and we have to pour the water on top of us. It's really, really annoying. It's very, very, and you know me, just now, This old hand here was getting numbed, the left hand and the left leg was getting numbed while I'm sitting in the lounge because of, carrying that water. It's too heavy, very, very heavy.
The crisis has taken a financial toll too, with some households having to buy drinking water. Others bank on water donations from community groups.
We would say for the past 2 years, we've been lacking service delivery, not just water, to be quite honest, yet that is the most important. Infrastructure in terms of sewers, our sewers are boiling over, the storm water, electricity, all of these things combined is making our lives miserable.
The stakes are high for the ANC as opposition parties have their best opportunity to stop it winning a majority in the coming election. Motions of no confidence on the current management have been raised, outlining how the ANC has failed to run the municipality.
So it means, therefore, that the ANC is skating on thin ice at this point because of this service delivery challenges. Then opposition political parties are capitalizing on that.
Durban's ANC mayor recently outlined plans to construct a new dam to deal with the water crisis. However, it could be too late to win over the city's disappointed voters. Yara Andinch, Africa Matters.
From the south, we head to the east. Floods in Burundi have so far claimed at least 29 lives and displaced more than 200,000 people. The government has started relocating flood victims to safer areas where they will be given land to start a new life. Moses Habariyamana reports.
This road was once used by vehicles, bicycles and motorcycles by the residents in Gatumba. Now, they use boats to travel from their homes to go to work or school. Hussein Kindera is a 78-year-old father of 6 children and 12 grandchildren. He has been living in Gatumba for more than 3 decades. Now, the rising water levels of Lake Tanganyika and floods have dramatically altered his life.
Life has changed. Where we used to grow crops, now it has flooded. We used to grow rice, cassava, maize and peanuts. Now everything has flooded.
Stranded, with a little hope as their property has been washed away. Residents in Gatumba say that, despite the town having experienced floods some years back, this time around, the waters are much worse than ever before.
I have 5 children who go to school, and now I have to move around to see if I can get food for them. Initially, I had a farm and harvested cassava and eggplants that helped.
The damage can plainly be seen with the crops, houses and farms all swept away. Residents here are concerned of the spread of the disease and hunger in weeks and months ahead.
The Burundi government is now relocating flood victims to a temporary and a much safer area. Many are left with no choice but to relocate and start a new life with their families.
Hundreds of people have so far been relocated, and the government is doing everything possible for its people to live in a better place. In doing so, they are being relocated to Mubimbi.
According to the United Nations, the number of people internally displaced by floodings in Burundi rose by 25%. The current situation in Gatumba threatens the livelihood of people already grappling with poverty. Despite government efforts to relocate the flood victims, families here say they won't leave their ancestral villages. Moses Havyarimana, Africa Matters, Gatumba.
And finally this week, we're heading to the port city of Bizerte in Tunisia. It sits on the Mediterranean coast and it's the northernmost city in Africa. That's our show this week. Let us know of what you think about the stories you've seen. Share your ideas and feedback. You can find us on X and on YouTube by searching TRT World Africa Matters. Thanks for watching, and it's Semusake Hadua. Goodbye from me, Samson Omale in Jos, North Central Nigeria.